We are live, alive, or animated.
Hey everyone.
Hey,
Hello, hello.
how you guys
Oh,
doing today?
cool,
Good.
cool. I'm excited about this. It's a great opportunity to chat
Good.
about what we're doing the first time, right? First time we
Yeah.
can do.
Absolutely.
How many of us are those? There's five of us. We are five amazing people. We're going to try and entertain you today. We're going to get started in just a minute talking about animation, 2D animation, and what it means to us and what it means to you.
It means
So,
everything.
it means everything. Good answer.
Gosh.
Great answer. That's really
Well, it's our
cool.
life, isn't it? So to us, it is
Yeah,
important.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, totally.
yeah, it's very much a life's mission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are doing a webinar today on charting your career in 2D animation. We've got expert advice, and I mean expert. You guys are going to really have a good time with this on moving from your passion to your profession. And that's something each of us has done. And we're going to tell you about that. My name is Scott Claus. I am the CG Spectrum Animation Manager. That means I manage both 2D and 3D animation at CG Spectrum, the school where we are all mentors and instructors and fans. My career is long and wonderful. I worked both for Disney and DreamWorks as in their 2D departments, and then I also worked in 3D animation at DreamWorks. And then I moved into live action creature effects at a place called Rhythm and Hues. I worked on Life of Pi. That was my last big credit. And one of the things I've been trying to do all my life is work in motion graphics, but the newest thing I've been doing is paying it forward and sharing what I've learned with others so that people who are as excited about animation as I've always been, they can do it too. So that's what I'm doing now. If you come to CG Spectrum, you'll see a lot of me. Today, what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce you to our amazing panelists, who, as I said, are 2D animation mentors at CG Spectrum, and they're also friends of mine, and they have an amazing roster of accomplishments, and we'll talk about that. I'll introduce them in a minute. Then we're going to talk about what 2D animation even is. If you came here not knowing what it is, you've come to the right place. If you do know what it is and you're already a big fan, you're also in the right place. But we'll talk about 2D animation. You may be a little bit surprised at what you find. We're going to talk a little bit about software technology. Everybody's interested in the latest, greatest technologies. We have our finger on the pulse of that stuff, and we're going to talk about it. Then we're going to talk a little bit about jobs and industries and what this means to you. And part of what we do at CG Spectrum is we make you job ready, or at least we make a good attempt. So we'll talk about that. And then lastly, we will talk about future proofing in today's jobs market and in tomorrow's job markets too. Then we're going to open it up to some Q&A time. So if you have questions, again, excuse me, please feel free to put them in the question and answer tab. You can uh, bet that we're going to try and get to them live. We'll also get to them in text if we don't have enough time, or we'll be answering them throughout the seminar. So ask us questions. Little briefly, CG Spectrum, it's an online school. We've been going for a long time now. It's been ranked one of the top global schools online for digital art, and we have a lot of different departments other than animation, but of course, we love animation. That's why we're here, right? And so you can check us out online. If you check out CG Spectrum, you'll find out all about it and have a look. Here's some of the courses we offer. You can also find all this information online. You'll get a lot of information if you go on our website. It's really cool. And you'll see how much fun stuff we offer. Obviously, 2D and 3D animation right smack dab there in the center. So check us out, cgspectrum.com. Here is a little bit about how the courses work. You'll find this online as well. But basically, we offer the first 12 weeks of our courses as a one-off if you want to just take the first term. We also offer the second and third terms as a bundle, and then we have a specialization term. So you have all sorts of options if you want to just try your hand at our courses a little bit, or if you actually want to go for a real deep dive and go through the entire thing. So again, check this out. It's on cgspectrum.com. And these are the things that we offer. So we offer some different options for how you're going to go through your courses. Again, check it out. All right, what I'd like to do now is introduce our amazing panelists, starting number one with Alfredo. Alfredo, would you like to tell
Hey
us
guys.
a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I started about almost 20 years ago now, and I've been doing mostly, I started as an animator and then I did some storyboarding, and then I went back to animation. I would say that mostly in the last few years, I've been doing 2D animation quite consistently. I didn't have to resort to storyboard, which was kind of my plan B. Back in 2008, there was kind of a down in the industry, and so I mean, I was happy about taking that other alternative because I learned a lot. But then after that, lasted a few years. But then, for example, Klaus came in, and after that, I would say that I could consistently keep working into the animation, and that's my intention, to keep working into that field, even though I also enjoy storyboarding. The two things are very close and they share a lot of the same skills. But I love, you know, animating emotions and animating body language, and that's, you know, to the animation, there is nothing better than that. And so that's what I've been doing for the last years. And yeah, so it's my life. I don't even remember when I started liking animation, loving animation. It's something that was embedded in me. And so maybe because my dad is an actor, and so I've been kind of, I haven't been introduced to it. I was already into it. And so it's my natural way of expressing myself. And I probably wouldn't do anything else, maybe apart from music, which is my other half of my life. So yeah, it's just the place where I find my peace and my way of saying who I am. Maybe, I don't know.
That's great, Alfredo. I didn't know that about your dad. That's really interesting.
Yeah, he's a theater actor. Yes.
Well, and that's one thing that we love about animation. It gets people, some of us are introverts, believe it or not. It gives us an opportunity to kind of act through another character. So that's really interesting that there's a
I guess that there is a
connection.
A lot of truth into that. I am very much introvert myself. When there's parties, after a party, I go home and I'm completely like, you know,
totally.
Yeah, totally. I need to sleep. You know, it's really energy draining for me. So maybe there is a connection to that, and so I like to sort of get out of myself and get into the characters, like, you know, wearing these characters, and putting some of myself. I think it's probably one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. You know, seeing your own drawings come to life, and after that amount of work that you put into it, because it is, you know, there goes a lot of work into it, but then you have as much reward once you play that shot and you see your characters alive. It's really,
certainly do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Alfredo. And I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions for you soon. So thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Next up, we've got Hubert Lapointe.
Yes, and myself. So it's kind of funny because I realized I probably piggybacking on what you were saying about the dip you had, Alfredo, when you were starting an animation, or a couple years down the line. When I started in the industry, it was that dip. So even though I studied traditional animation from the get-go, I had to actually relearn to animate in mostly cutout animation for a while. Because being Canadian, living in Montreal, most of our gigs were coming from TV shows made in the US, and everything was kind of switching to cut out rather than actually, traditional, really drawing everything. So for people that are not familiar, like cut out being like breaking a character apart and moving it as a puppet, which is sort of a flat version of animating in 3D. And yeah, so I've been doing that for many years now. I guess from this list here, the biggest shows I've worked on are Rick and Morty's and Solar Opposites, most recently. But I've been, animating, supervising animation on TV shows, and now I'm mostly directing. And I started my own studio called Bon Jam Animation, where I produce, direct, animate with a team of like-minded artists. And so I come from it's actually funny because a little bit like you said, like Alfredo, like being like, not remembering sort of, how you came to be in animation. to me, I've always been like in the creative side of things and having fun, like creating games or creating like being like that kid that draws, all the time. And I think, animation has just been kind of an excuse to be able to, have a fun, sort of like entrepreneur life, staying creative. Because everything I do is around, I'm teaching animation here, of course. But even when I think about like, how could I create a career for myself, it's always been around like animation, of course, doing storyboarding and stuff like that as well, but mostly like staying in that realm of 2D animation without, for example, never really thinking about switching to 3D, for example. Although I, very much like 3D animation, I like a lot of the other mediums, but I think 2D has really something special to it. And in the last couple of years, there's been kind of a revival of traditional animation, of course, not on paper most of the time. But I've had a lot of chances to work on traditional projects, which have been a blast. And I'm just, I think we're maybe proofs that it's still possible to just draw every day and make a living out of that.
That's a really good point. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And we'll talk
Actually,
about that some
yeah,
more.
if I can
Yeah.
jump in a second about
Please,
this.
please.
There was a point where I wanted to learn 3D because I thought it was the next thing, right? So I thought better learn 3D before 2D falls down. But I never had time for it. So I wanted to study, but then jobs were coming in. And so I can't animate 3D because 2D always kept me busy.
You're too busy.
So, yeah,
That's great.
yes, I couldn't.
That's really cool. And I'm sure a lot of people will be happy to hear that. So nice. Well,
And maybe just I'm sorry, I'm stealing the mic
please.
just a second, but I think but there's something interesting about that because I think that naturally people will do that. Like some people like you and even myself, like I didn't have like too many contracts at first, but I was like I made a decision of just staying in the drawing department and not the for example playing with puppet like 3D puppets department, which could have been super fun. But I think sometimes when you think there's going to be like, for example, too many people animating and you don't know if you're going to have a place for it, some people will go to 3D, some people will go to now maybe AI stuff. We'll see what the future holds, but I think there's always going to be room for people that want to stick around doing something if you commit to it, to a certain level.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Good.
No,
good points. Yeah, thanks. No, thank you. Thank you. All right, thanks, Hubert. And now last but not least, we've got Sykosan. Tell us.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Sykosan. I'm French, so I live in London nowadays, but I've been in this industry for about 20 years. And yeah, I come from like a small place where I have to say my family was not really into animation, so or any kind of arts. So I kind of discovered art kind of late. I studied architecture first. I was very much into engineering and architecture, and then I realized one day that I loved animation. I wanted to try it out. And maybe some of you feel like that. You just don't know that you're discovering about schools and that sort of thing. It happened to me quite late. I actually graduated in architecture and then eventually discovered that I could study animation. So I jumped in. I decided to change careers, sort of thing, and I have no regrets. It was actually I never looked back. I really love animation. It's so creative. It's so rewarding, so I just keep doing this. So I started in working. My first job was like for sort of a French studio, and we were doing some. I was doing some opening sequence for a feature film. Sounds great, but actually it was very simple. It was like a titles just animated in a very simple way. But then quickly I moved to London, which is a great place for animation. It's very international. There's tons of studios here, so it's important to find a place where there is a lot of animation to help your chances of getting a job, obviously. But we can work remotely nowadays, so I do a lot of that. I do work a lot remotely, and essentially I worked in advertising industry. So I've done a lot of adverts, mainly in my job. Maybe it's the industry in London that kind of does a bit more of that, but there is video games as well. So I did a bit of that as well. Did some music videos. I'm most well known for making a music video for Katy Perry. That was 3 years ago, I think. That was a lot of fun because that was strangely at the moment of the pandemic, and everybody turned to animation. That was the funny side of that, is that because you couldn't put like a team of people together to record a dancing or typical sort of music video. Suddenly we all this industry turns their eyes to animation. Maybe that helped animation go back or something, I don't know. But yeah, suddenly there was all these music videos to be done really quickly. And I worked like on a space of 4 months. We made 2 music videos, including that one, and that was a lot of fun. Since then, I've just been basically a freelancer for most of my career, so nearly 20 years. So it's not for everybody. That you can work in a studio for years on TV series or a feature film, that sort of thing. So there's different ways to work in this industry, which is great. You can sort of find your path, not only in the industries, but in the styles, different styles of studios and that sort of thing. So I personally love the this advertising industry because the projects are kind of short, and we constantly have to come up with new ideas and try new styles. So yeah, this is it. So that's where I am today. I'm moving towards trying to create my own content nowadays. So that's what I'm kind of more interested in. I would like to make my own films. This is a very different dynamic, trying to find money for and the time for that kind of thing. That takes a lot of a very different mindset, but it's something we can do as well. Some people start that very soon in their career. So I hope you guys can find your path in animation. There are many of those. So that's about it for me, I think.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's really awesome. And so thank you. Thanks, Zach, and thanks everybody. So what I want to do now is just talk a little bit about what 2D animation is, with a kind of underlying motive of saying that 2D animation is just about anything you want it to be. And we talk a lot about getting a job. We talk about maintaining your edge and staying with the technology and working for the right companies and things. But 2D is also an art form. And we have a lot of students who do this just because they want to learn how to do it. And another reason that I wanted to have this webinar was to explain that 2D animation can be so many different things and not just, oh, I need that job that fits into that peg. And part of what we have today assembled are 3 people who are doing different things that are representing different aspects of animation. And so, for example, like Psych is doing the freelance route. Alfredo, I think of you more as like a classical animator, a classical animation person, which is the way I was raised as well. And then you can do it. I mean, we can all do it all, but you also kind of specialize in more rigged animation where you're actually using a character rig. And so just there alone, just with us here, we already represent several different facets of animation that I don't think a lot of people really know about. I don't think it's obvious. I think some people think, oh, you're just drawing all the time. And other people think that you're just drawing on a computer, literally drawing on the computer screen or something, and coming up with these ideas. So that's what I'd like to talk about right now,
Yeah,
is what is 2D animation to you guys, basically.
Yeah, no, I just want to bounce on that because it's always been part of animation to have all these different types of styles, right? Back in the days, we'd have animation with sand, right? I don't know if you know about this. Like you have like a sheet of sand and you just move the sand, take a picture, and move the sand. That was an animation technique, There was the first cutout animation. They were actually real cutout. You cut shapes around, move them on it's all these things. So being an animator doesn't mean just drawing. It's all these things. And so nowadays, yes, there are different techniques. Like you said, Hubert, you do a lot of what we call cutout animation, or it's got many names actually, I think. Yeah, but we were talking about 3D, right? I started in 3D as well, actually, because my career started in the time when 3D was a big thing. And in a way, I want to say that you can find your path through time. You don't have to like just right away find the right direction. You can transfer, what the knowledge you build, let's say animating a 3D rig, you can use that knowledge to animate a 2D character. Scott, you kind of went from 3D to 2D as well, right? Oh, no, the opposite.
Yes, speaking of which, I mean, that's why I wanted to do this, is I did everything. I did stop motion when I was a kid. I lived where Will Vinton, which became Leica, Coraline and Kubo and the Two Strings and stuff. I came from there, and that's what they did. They did stop motion. So I tried that. I tried everything. Then I did hand drawn, and then I moved into 3D. A lot of people resisted 3D because it's a different part of your brain and it's more technical and less drawing. I just liked motion graphics, so I wanted to learn it all. I love it all. I love the whole thing, and I do it whether or not I'm getting paid. So, that's why I always tell students, come find us. We're the club you want to be in if that's the sort of thing you like. But yeah, I think it's important that people know that. I don't think that's obvious. And so, like, Hubert, I wonder if you could explain to anybody who's sort of a novice what it is you mean when we talk about the rigs, animation rigs. Like, what does that even mean?
I think it's really the idea of, like, instead of redrawing the character every frame for its presence on screen over time, you're really you're splitting the character into different pieces, and you're basically, it's like Saika-san said, it's like the old technique of just moving it and taking a photo. But of course, we're in a computer now, so you're not taking a photo. You do what we call put a keyframe. So you do a snapshot of that position, in space and time in the software. And so basically what it allows for is that, let's say you want to do a character and you just want the arm to move, then you just animate the arm. The rest of the character would stay still, but would still be like in the actual scene. Back in the days, of course, if I think even traditional animation evolved to be doing some usage of cutout. That's the funny thing, because sometimes, I'm sure some of you have already done that, but you're animating a character waving goodbye. What we're going to do is we're going to do one layer for the body and the head and the legs of the character, and then a second layer that will just be the arm waving goodbye, right? So you can just animate on that layer separately. And so cutout is just the concept of pushing it, far enough that you're not just splitting some parts to save time. You're splitting everything, so you have access to animate everything individually, right? You could basically fake, because that's the thing, right? You could fake a rotation of a character because you're removing the assets in the face to pretend that this design is moving around like in 3D, but of course it's always 2D. The funny thing, if we bring that back to 3D, is that 3D will still be a 2D image in the end, right? When you're watching a screen, like in a theater, for example, it's just a flat image, but the tools to create that flat image are actual. We call that 3D because if you could 3D print it, you could grab Shrek, for example, right? But you couldn't grab like the Little Mermaid. If we were to like 3D print that, it would still just be like a flat surface with, a mermaid silhouette, right? So I think that's the biggest difference between, of course, 2D and 3D. And, cutout is really close to 3D, but we're pretending that it's 3D, but it's very just a bunch of pieces of paper that are flat on a screen.
It's all an illusion, isn't it, you guys?
Oh,
Everything we do is just, it's magic.
Exactly.
But, well, by contrast, Alfredo, how did things go on Klaus? If you could kind of explain a little bit about the process you, as an animator, worked on.
Yeah, okay. Klaus was entirely hand-drawn for what concerns the characters, but the approach was very practical, and so it didn't have to be that way for things that were tedious to draw. So, for example, the cart where they are going with the reindeers, the cart is made in 3D. So the 2D was used wherever we needed flexible tool and being able to just push with our fantasy, with the expressions, which is more difficult in 3D. You can, of course, but it's more immediate if you just draw it. Okay, and so yeah. So in Klaus, it's a combination of pure 2D animation, the way it was done in the old school Disney movies, and plus some 3D implementation. And then there was this the thing that made Klaus particularly special was the lighting, which was a layer of lighting added to the traditional 2D animation ink and paint. And that was both human and software made. There was a special software that would be able to, in between, automatically the lighting that was hand painted on the keyframes. And so the software wouldn't be able to do it entirely in automation. There was some human intervention here and there, but I would consider Klaus traditional movie in the real sense of a traditional modern movie in the real sense of the term. So yeah, what to reconnect myself to what you guys were talking about earlier on about the variety of roles in animation, in 2D animation, for example. One word that comes to my mind when it comes to either making a movie or a TV show is teamwork. It's you know, working in 2D or working in animation in general, but also in 2D is based on teamwork, and so it's a very social work, especially if you work in the studio. Um, you know, you get to know a lot of people, and there is a lot of shifting roles. Like I've known people who was maybe starting in production, and then they found themselves working into storyboarding, for example, because they were into the studio. Maybe there was need of a storyboard artist, they couldn't find anyone, and so I could do it. And you know, there was some possibility of changing role, because if you just scroll the end credits of any movie or TV show in animation, you will see a lot of names, and that's because it takes a huge amount of people to do those things, right? And I think that's an added value to this sort of job, because it's, if you want to be like a hamster and, you know, run into your own wheel, you can do that. But if you want to play in an orchestra, you can do that too. You know, it's like you can participate to the building up of a huge structure, which can be a movie or a TV show. And I think that's one of the best aspects. I've been working both in-house, like in studios, like Cartoon Saloon in Ireland, for example. I spent a couple of years there, and I've been working in spa studios, of course. The rest of my career, I worked as a freelancer, so from home. And I know that if I wanted to, I could apply for working in a studio. Sooner or later that would happen, and I would have to, of course, to move. But it is a possibility. You can, you know, if you reach a certain level, you can decide to leave the studio life and be with a lot of people, a lot of talents, a lot of interesting people. Or you can be freelancing like I'm doing now, because right now in this part of my life, I would rather do this. It's a different experience, but you know, it's there is a lot of variety. That's what I wanted to stress about the world of animation, 2D and 3D, regardless.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Just to bounce on that, I'm just curious. Like, for example, Alfredo, you worked on, you know, many productions. What's the longest, you know, you've been hired at the same place?
I think it's 1 year and a half, which is both for Klaus, which lasted exactly 1 year and a half, I would say. If Ember hadn't been canceled, that would have been longer, because I have been involved into Ember since the pre-production. As a lead animator on the main character, I was helping to develop the character, helping the supervisor on it. And so it was a longer run. You know, I started from earlier on, and that would have been longer. It can happen that you can be hired on a production that lasts so long, but also if you are hired by a studio, for example, like I know people who works in Cartoon Saloon, for example. I have friends who are there in a stable way. They are just going from one project to the other, and so you know, you can if you want to work with a studio for that specific amount of time, it can last sometimes. I would say that I've been working also on very short contracts. So I mean, like 3 weeks, a month, you know, things like that, which is not a problem for me, because it allows me to change style often, which is something I like as a challenge. And also it you know, it's refreshing, because after months and months you're drawing the same way, maybe you might want to change. I'm not so much, you know, I don't get bored easily, so it's okay to be bored for me. But I also enjoy, if you know, if the project finishes and there is something new, I enjoy that as well. So I would say a couple of years stopped. Yes.
And that's like
I
what
was
you were saying, sorry, Hubert, but that's like what you were saying, Psych, about you're doing freelance projects and you're doing shorter projects, but you're also working in a different software. Can you
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about the fact that you're not
that's
using, what are you
true.
using?
Yeah. The school is teaching how to use Tin Boom, which is fair enough, because this is probably the most used software. It's the kind of standard of the industry. But not every studio uses that software. So particularly over here in Europe, we tend to use other types of software. But I mean, some students come to me sometimes, think, oh, what? How can I, what happens if I get a job but it's not the right piece of software? It's happened to me before. Different situations where, for example, I had to learn a piece of software when I started a job, and that's okay. It's not rocket science. The 2D tools are not the hardest part of it. The hardest part of it is the art. It's you're the animator. This is your skills that are really important. So you can transfer those skills to other pieces of software. So I use Photoshop, for example, quite a lot for animation. A few people know that Photoshop, you can animate with that, but it has a very simple timeline. And but there are many options. A lot of people animate nowadays more and more on tablets, interestingly, and you can do some really good work with that as well. Some people animate on other software such as TV Paint.
Blender. Everyone wants to talk about
Yeah.
Blender.
So I have been on productions where every animator pretty much works on a different piece of software. And you might think, how does that work, right? Well, it works fine, because what we do, well, at the end of the day, we communicate with a certain type of format of pictures. They're drawings, right? So you need to send drawings to someone else so that they can pick it up and keep working on it, adding the colors, or maybe comping things together. Well, that happens usually with the typical format, which is called PNG files. And all you need to do is use the software you use, export those formats, give them away, and they'll be picking that up and they can keep working with that. Now, depends, some studios will be very attached to a specific type of software because they have a particular pipeline. They have a way of doing things. They want to keep to it, and they don't want to deviate. But when that's the case, most of them will be ready to teach you. Yeah, so they'll be like, if you're good, if you have the skills, and you're coming in to work for months, what's a few days just to teach you how to use the software? It's fine. If you've got the skills, that's what's important. So when you make a showreel, you demonstrate your skills to the world. You don't need to say, oh, I did this in Tin Boom. You can, no problem. You can list the software that you know how to use. But what's most important is how good an animator you are.
Yeah. Do you guys agree with that? I mean, do you use different
Absolutely.
Like, do you guys use Toon Boom exclusively, Hubert and Alfredo, or do you use other things?
I started on Flash. Toon Boom
You started on
wasn't
Flash,
there.
okay.
Yes, but Toon Boom wasn't there.
Okay.
Then it came in, and I was like, what's that? And but then finally I had to learn it. I used it for the first time on Klaus. Before that, I had to learn Toon Boom storyboard, which was something I was forced to do to work on a production where I proposed Flash, and they say, no, we are going to use Toon Boom storyboard. So at the beginning, I was kind of hostile to the idea of learning a new software, but then I learned that it is actually nice to learn new tools, and I'm starting to look forward to that, to be honest. The last time it happened, I was which was on Ember. I had to learn Blender, which was the longest, the steepest learning curve I've ever experienced, which, by the way, if you have guidance, can last maybe a month. So if you're really dedicated and you have someone guiding you through that, which can happen if you are in a studio, like I guided people on Blender when I was there in Spa to the newcomers, you can understand it in about a month. Or even less than that if you do that full time. Other softwares are usually simpler than that, like Harmony. The basics of Harmony for 2D animation take less than that.
You mean like what we teach at CG Spectrum? Like that?
And so, I mean, I wouldn't worry too much about the software, to be honest. I would focus my attention about the animation technique. If you want to become a 2D animator, there is so much more to study in that field rather than what software you're going to use, what tool is going to, that's secondary, I would say. What's more important is, learning what is basically common to even the old school animation, the one done on pencil and paper. It's still the same thing, basically. It's just a different.
It's a bit different with cutout animation, but
Oh, yeah. I'm talking about frame by
But
frame. Yes. I'm talking about the frame by frame one. Yes.
Honestly, because you're right. I think if you're coming from like a pre-production portion of the pipeline, or if you're coming from traditional animation, I think you can create everything using whatever software. And people, like, I have a friend that does, for example, visual development in pre-production, and of course, they only want an image, right? They don't care how this is, coming to life, like the software used or whatever. Like, it's like there's no problem, right? But I think it's the same thing if what they want is a sequence of a character moving, and you can then export that to another software to do compositing and everything in it. That's great, but of course, for cutout, it's very different.
Oh, no,
And
yes.
even, but the other thing too is that, like you said, Alfredo, like a lot of those projects required a lot of people. And especially if you're not very familiar with 2D pipelines, whether it's traditional or, cutout, if you watch the credits of any show or any film, you'll be surprised at how many roles you actually don't know what they're doing, right? Not, you don't understand what is the job. And there's a lot of people, probably like half the credits you don't know, right? And there's still people in the office doing actual work to help the team make that come to be. And let's say in a cutout setting, and even in some traditional settings, I think a lot of people that are not as skilled, artistically, which is often younger people, so people starting out in the pipeline, will need to be at least knowledgeable of the pipeline structure, so they can at least do the grunt work of doing some stuff that, for example, somebody that is super talented in rough animation will not have to deal with, right? You're just drawing cool drawings in the air, people are grabbing it and placing it somewhere, but there's an actual person that has to like put it together. So sometimes what I say to students is, of course, learning animation is like the key thing, but if you're looking for employment and you're scared that you might not get, super skillful by the time you want to get a job, I think having a good understanding of at least the pipelines that are in your area. So it's not necessarily Toon Boom, it's not necessarily cutout. Like, I don't really like, doesn't really matter. But often I tell my students, like, you should Google whatever studios in your area, and go and check out, like, and stalk a little bit, like what type of projects they're doing. And and even check the credits maybe of their shows and see, oh, okay, like it's just cutout. Okay, maybe I should know cutout, or it's just traditional, I should know traditional. And so that's where sometimes I think, let's say, like, it's just a good example is like people will talk about doing animation in Procreate, which is fine. It's on iPad, it's super accessible, it's great. But if if a student asks me, should I do the course, because some people want to do the course, for example, on Procreate instead of Toon Boom, and they're talking to me about getting a job as quickly as possible after the course, of course, I'm kind of encouraging them to, be on Toon Boom and not. But if they're like, hey, I really want to do freelance for advertisement in, traditional animation or illustration, I'll be like, yeah, Procreate is, quite fine. But if they, if, for example, they come to me because they like Rick and Morty and they're talking to me about Rick and Morty and then show me Procreate, I'm like, you should you should consider the software aspect of it. But like you said, Alfredo, I think if people are skillful, they will learn. But I think that, and maybe that's just a personal way of seeing this, but I feel like sometimes when people are starting in the field, they will discover if they like it or not using the actual tool, right? So I have some friends that, because like I said, we started in a time where there was a lot less animation. So most people switched to cutout because that was what was happening. It was either 3D or cutout. And a lot of friends I had were like, oh, I would never animate cutout. I hate this. So they switched to doing like backgrounds. They switched to do storyboards. They went into 3D. Like, they realized trying it out that they didn't like it. And I think that sometimes being kind of like realistic with what is supposed to be expected of you, at that moment, makes you realize, do I want to commit like 3, 4, 5 years to this, or do I want to start to switch already? which is for us, it's more like we already have, I think, established careers. And so if, for example, tomorrow Toon Boom explodes and I can never use Toon Boom anymore, of course I will take the first, next software somebody's going to throw at me, right? Just because my key thing will be to keep my career going and not necessarily like I will like we said earlier, like I like animation so much slash too much that I will not get out of the boat just because it's a new software.
I hated Maya when I first started, and I hated Flash when I first started. I resisted it with the core of my being. I was drawing every day, and I love drawing every day. Now they're saying it all has to be done with this other side of the brain, and I really resisted. And then I gave in, and the clouds opened up, and I loved it. And I think you make a good point is what we're teaching you at CG Spectrum is animation, and the software will come and go. And it will be variations on themes and things like that. But once you learn how to learn, then everything is gold. You'll see. Which now brings us to the topic at hand. The one in everyone's mind, I'm sure, is can I make a living doing this sort of thing? Is it possible for me as a student, whether I go to CG Spectrum or I'm out in the world, wherever, can I get a job? What do you guys think? I mean, you're working, so most of our mentors are, so it must be possible, right?
Yeah, what I like about animation is that there's many entry levels. I think you would talk a little bit about that. But first, you have a choice of industries. There's a choice of style, but you can start with simple things. You can just start. We need people to put in colors in the drawings, and that's a very simple thing that everybody can master really quickly. So that gives you an opportunity to work in a studio. It's such a simple thing to do. Then there's cleanup. Cleanup definitely demands more skills. So if you can, a lot of animators specialize in cleanup, and some specific projects really rely on a very special quality of the line and a special treatment of the line and the shading and the sort of things. So it demands so much attention to detail sometimes that some animators really specialize in being able to give it a great cleanup, and that can create a style and give an identity to a whole show. So it's a very important thing, yet it's maybe not as difficult as being a key animator, for example, where the skills are a bit more demand a bit more practice. But then there's all these steps. Basically, you can sort of start at the bottom, getting used to the industry, getting experience, and as time goes by, you can climb the ladder. Now, if you come out of the school and you're an amazing animator right away, that's the other good thing, is that if you have the skills, studios will acknowledge that, and they will hire you for the skills that you have. Absolutely. So you don't have to start, as a cleanup artist if you don't want to. If you have the skills to be an animator, you can work straight away as an animator. There's no reason why not. A character designer or a storyboard artist. So I mean, that's what I found in the industry in London. It was very open. It was all about, what can you do? Show me your work. We'll find a job for you. So getting into that first step, getting into the industry, it's not too much, of a difficult thing, I would say. It's accessible.
It doesn't have to be, maybe.
It doesn't have to be, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be. I agree. Other thoughts? What do you guys think, Hubert, Alfredo?
Well, I kept working the whole time. So as I said, I wanted to learn 3D and I couldn't. That's how much it kept me busy.
So busy, you couldn't even learn. Yeah, I love that story. That's fantastic.
I had some breaks, but I wouldn't say some of that was wanted, it's like it was more me wanted the holidays. So I probably had, maybe the longest was maybe 2 months, but I had a part in that. So if I wanted to keep working, I could have. So if you reach a certain level of skills, or if you are flexible enough to switch role, I don't see the problem there. And I don't see 2D animation going anywhere. Maybe it's going to change in terms of technology, in terms of look. I was thinking, for example, now that Sykosan, you mentioned cleanup, right? And if you were a cleanup artist born in, like, working in the end of the 50s, you would see at some point the job wasn't there anymore because they invented the Xerox printer in Disney, for example. And so maybe if you were a cleanup artist, you would think, okay, no jobs anymore. And that lasted until the end of the 70s. And then the Little Mermaid came again, and then they started doing cleanup again for another 30 years. So sometimes we get scared at these technology changes. But then I think that there is a component of sort of collective enthusiasm about something. So we find a new toy and we throw away the old one. But then after a while, we think that the old one wasn't that bad after all. And so we start playing with both, right? Like the music, the LPs, right? The records, they were gone forever with the CD. And now they're all over the place again because, you know, it's vintage and it pops and whatever, but they're back again. And so it's a changing world. You need to be flexible. You need to be ready for changes, but I don't see 2D going anywhere, to be honest. We need that, you know, as a species, I would say.
Yeah. One thing I love. Sorry, go on.
Oh, go ahead, Sakosan. Yeah.
I was going to say that 2D has something that was never taken away by 3D or other technologies, and you see it a lot when you see a beautiful movie like the Spider-Verse. You can see how 3D is kind of jealous of the quality of 2D animation. They can't help themselves. They have to make the 3D look like 2D. That's why 2D will always be there, I believe, because it has something unique, that you have this ability of creating new frames. On every new drawing, you can just change all the rules. You have this freedom that you do not have in 3D or other techniques. And I think this is the beauty of 2D for me. I was in 3D, like I said, and one day I decided to move completely to 2D. Not because I didn't like 3D, but I felt like I had more freedom, and I enjoyed that freedom in the 2D world.
Well, there's an elephant in the room that just entered, actually. Somebody just asked about our friend. I know. I think you have a good treatise on this one. Let's talk about AI, shall we? Let's get it out of the way and deal with it.
The big monster.
Yeah.
Who wants to start?
I know. Well, I know you had a great thing. We were talking the other day. You kind of went on a tirade about it. That was wonderful. Made us all feel a little better about ourselves in the future.
But I think it just, you know, I think it piggybacks on the same idea that Sakosan was saying, that, you know, it's always a matter of skills, right? Because, you know, you'll see story pops online, you know, and I think there's a lot of politics around, like, you know, is AI great or is AI bad or whatever. But I think that, you know, the great question is, like, how, you know, like, how much is it really affecting our day-to-day work, right? And maybe some, you know, maybe we're at the tail end of who's going to be affected by it. But still, like, for example, today, you know, AI has been out for a while. None of us here, and we could go more in detail, but I think from our discussions, none of us here have been really affected by this. Like I said, personally, I had some friends that saw, you know, AI being used in, for example, more like visual development. So very earlier on in the pipeline. But, you know, for example, some people talk about the fact that there's no copyright for now associated with that, so you can't really use any image coming out of it as an output. But as well, there's no way to, and that's kind of like the mechanic that seems to be like off at the moment. But there's no way to get like a very like precise result, right? Because let's say you get an image, but you're like, oh, can you just change that pixel here? Because that's the real question, right? If you cannot change one pixel from the image you just got, that's the proof that this tool, for now, is not flexible enough to work. And that might change at some point, right? But what we've seen so far is more a, you know, kind of like a marketing thing around making us believe that it's getting so good nowadays that the fact that the pixel cannot be changed is not a problem, because we get cooler filters on it and cooler, like, you know, the database is like less apparently stealing from people, for example, which should be like cool. But the fact that we cannot change one pixel, you know, from one image to the other is kind of problematic. And you know, again, I think that maybe there's a sort of like a, you know, a money component into that, right? And I think companies are doing AI right now are trying to make people invest into AI. And what we see is that it has that kind of like slot machine feeling to it, right? Where you generate an image, you pull the lever, you see what you get. And the next time around, you know, you have to pull the lever again and see what you get, even though it's going to be informed by some prompts you're giving it. But the thing is, if you're really trying to get a good result, you have to put money in the machine to get more token to play with the lever, right? So you can kind of see where a little bit like if advertisement placement was so good that people would just see ads that they like and then they would buy that stuff, it would, people that are placing ads would be losing money. Here, I think if the AI was working perfectly, the person that makes you believe that the AI works perfectly would lose money because you wouldn't be, paying that many tokens for it. So I think that right now we're in, maybe it might change. Like maybe there's going to be a savior of AI will come and decide that AI should just be doing the thing and not do kind of like a alternate version of the thing that's presented as, the a replacement for something. But my personal opinion is that the state that it is now is not affecting us, in any way. For example, in TV animation, in feature films, except for development purposes, and very earlier on, because if let's say the design that we see on screen at the end was exactly the same as some image that just got out of the AI machine, it would still have some copyrights issues, I think.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I think there's another aspect to this as well. Even if like we live in a world in the future where AI is producing a lot of the content, it's likely to happen at some point down the line. But I think there's still something that we as humans love about other humans doing things. We put value on that right away. It's just a huge difference, right? I don't know. You have a glass in your kitchen. And it's just been created by as a series, and it's just every same glass. It might be a great glass. It might be actually very beautiful, but you're not going to give it as much care as the one that you bought from this artisan, the manufacturer with their own hands, and they've got their signature on it, and you went somewhere to find it. There's a complete different value there. Even if that one is less strong than the one you bought from the shop, it still has a lot more value. And I think people will value what other people do. So we always have a very conscious understanding that this is a produce of the industry, or this is a produce of people putting their passion into it. And I think there's always room for that, and nowadays it exists just like before, so I don't think this will ever disappear. And anyway, why should people stop doing animation or the kind of arts because a computer can do it? I don't think that's a good reason not to do it, because otherwise, why would you draw when other artists can draw better than you? You still want to draw, you still want to animate, right? That doesn't stop you.
Yeah.
You want to be there, you want to be part of the game, you want to have fun, and so continue, and don't let that put you off, I would say.
And I think just
sorry.
I'll go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please.
But just to circle back, like on the skills thing, because I think that's what we're promoting collectively here, is that I'll give you an example that relates to this, but with cutout, because when cutout came out, and if you go back 10, 15, 20 years ago, you could tell it was made with a cutout software. Like it was very clear that it was very cheap animation. And I think that to most people that got replaced by cutout for a year or 2 or 5 years and whatnot, most people were like, wow. Like I gave, for example, 10 years of my life doing great 2D animations, and they're replacing me by the worst possible show ever. And for example, for a while, because the designs and the way it was moving was so basic, a lot of shows became, for example, voice driven, right? So maybe the voice acting for TV animation, for 2D animation got better during that time in the States, because they were putting more money in that because they didn't have budgets to make great animations visually, right? But at some point nowadays, we're kind of like in the postmodern era of that cutout phase. They all want us to feel like it is traditional, right? The point is they want us to use the tool, but what they want is the thing they replaced the tool with. So the thing, they just want to go back to the same. They want people to. It's like that no CG vibe, right? Where they want every like Hollywood movie to be like practical. It's the same thing here, right? They want they want Rick and Morty to feel as traditional looking as possible, right? That would be like their wish, which is great. But you can imagine AI creating a dip at some point, which is maybe going to be creating I don't know when. I think they would have to deal with the copyright thing, but let's assume that's out of the way at some point. Maybe we create a dip, but at some point they would like the machine to be, you know, imitating something that we used to like before, right? That we were still doing. And at some point, that's where I think the learning part of this, you know, forget about the public discourse and the whole discussion around is this good or bad, ethical or not. But they're going to need artists to tell that machine how to do things properly. And often, you know, I think for every artist that really, you know, learned about art as a broader spectrum than just, for example, animation, you know, when somebody does, for example, color for a background, they haven't just watched, for example, Disney background history, right? They've watched like painters from every period. They know like influences from everywhere else. So as artists, we have to learn things that people are not necessarily conscious of. Like the whole background that comes with creating great art is pumping so much like, you know, surrounding knowledge and sometimes like art history into it, that I think is still something that will be valuable. So again, when we're talking about maybe the tool is not as important as the skills you should be learning,
Absolutely.
I think it applies even to AI if it were to replace everything.
You want to jump on that, Alfredo?
Yeah, no,
Did you have
I don't know. You know, it's obviously a sensitive topic, you know, and I can't predict how it's going to go. What I can see is that it's probably going to be one more tool, and maybe it's also going to improve our life. I mean, we are not making 2D animation, taking pictures on a film camera anymore. We are drawing directly on a Cintiq, and that improved our life, right? Because we didn't have to wait 2 days to see our pencil test. Yeah, maybe there will be less people developing films, but they can develop other kind of films, or you know, I don't think that's that I don't see that necessarily as an immediate threat to the job. It could actually have some good surprises for us. Maybe an animator, instead of doing 5 seconds per week, like we used to do on Klaus or any other 2D feature film like that, maybe we will be able to do 25, and maybe so we will see more movies. I don't know, but I don't see the human intervention ceasing to exist at some point. You know, like photography didn't replace painting. We still have painters. Exactly. And CD didn't replace music bands. We still have bands playing live, you know. So it's gonna change the market. It's gonna probably have an effect, but it's not necessarily going to be a bad one. I'm scared a bit, but also optimistic about it. Right now in my life, in my direct experience, I haven't been affected by it at all. So
I think this is a good argument. The same argument has been made about 3D back in the days. I remember someone saying, well, 3D is gonna, you know, is gonna make everything cheaper, faster. We're gonna have to go all these people.
At the beginning, it happened. At the beginning, the impact was like that, but
there
then
might be like a moment. That's right.
Then it got much more expensive.
But that's the thing. Some people said this, you know, we're not going to know. We're going to spend the same amount of money. We're not going to do less we're going to do more for less money. We're just going to do more. That's all. We're going to use the same amount of money and we're going to do more. So, and for that, you still keep hiring people. And I think that's kind of what AI probably is going to do for us. It's going to be a new tool. It's going to give us more opportunities to go further. You know, it's going to be just giving us more to play with. So why not do that? Yeah.
One problem I see with the AI right now, even used in visual development, is it can be sometimes great to, you know, play this slot machine and have something that a human couldn't possibly do, because it's actually an artificial brain that is creating that. But the problem isn't much there. I would say is when you need a retake. You know, the process of getting to a specific artistic goal is always the same. It's like the director says, I like this or I don't. And if he doesn't, he will ask for a change. And that change is going to be so specific that I don't see anywhere near in the future an AI able to understand so specifically what's needed. So it's going to be a help maybe in a sort of a quantity, low quality sort of way. Maybe it's going to solve some tedious parts of our job, but I don't see that necessarily as a threat. So for now.
Yeah, for now, that's the operative word. Yeah, and again, I think we all agree that one of the things that attracts us most about 2D animation is that organic quality. And the further you get away from it, the less people are interested. If everyone can do it, it's not that interesting eventually. But it's the fact that it looks so interesting and you can feel the organic quality, especially with stop motion. I've found people are fascinated by the fact that you can tell those are really little puppets. I mean, nowadays they may be digital puppets, but it still has a certain feel to it. So I agree with you guys. And I think that's exciting. And a reminder too that really you're doing this because it's something that you love to do. All of us have said we were doing animation from an early age, or at least we were interested in it and interested in motion graphics. And so you're doing what you love and loving what you do. Look, you have to work to pay rent. That's just kind of one of the ways, or to pay to live. It's just you have to have a nice balance. You have to have relationships with people and with yourself. You have to work. You have to be able to eat and things. But if you're going to have to do all those things, why not do something you really love? And why not love what you do? And as long as that's a thing, I think we're not going to have to worry too much about robots taking over the universe. Now, play this in another 5 years and prove me wrong, but at least for now, I think that we're doing all right with that. That is fascinating stuff. And if we want to talk about some more about AI, if you guys have questions about that, please let us know. What I'd like to do now is kind of talk about the questions that we've got. We have some really interesting things. I'll probably come back to this slide, but on the screen right now is a slide that shows you some of the inroads to learning about the school. This one's probably the most important one in some ways. You can start at the beginning of the month. So we are taking students right now for the next month's lineup of courses. So, if you're thinking about it, you can talk to us some more. You can talk to admissions, but we do start classes every month. And so you can jump right in. And we have a lot of really interesting information on the website. Plus, we have people you can talk to. So if you want to know more about the school, jump on the link. You'll find contacts there. And you can talk to us more about it. And here's some more information. I'm going to leave this on the screen and then we're going to jump into some of the questions. The biggest question I get all the time, and one of the questions that I'm seeing a couple people are asking is, listen, how do I get started? I'm living out in the middle of nowhere, or I'm in a country that doesn't support this. Or if you're in my case, you were back in the covered wagon days when dinosaurs would chase covered wagons and there was no internet and there were no books and there's no resources. And certainly nobody who worked in the animation industry. What are you supposed to do? Here's what my number one recommendation is, and then I'll let you guys take over. But my number one recommendation is you have to get out there and you have to prove that you're interested in this stuff. That may mean that you do it online. It means you go on Facebook and you find groups, or you go on Insta and you find people who are doing what you love, like some of the people who are here today. And you make connections with other people who are interested. If you can, you physically go to places. Nothing works better, I think, than going out into the world and getting into stuff, going to conventions, going to colleges that are doing presentations of their end of the year work, going to groups that are meetups and things. Getting out there, you'll find people who are doing the things that you love to do, and they're trying to accomplish the things that you're trying to accomplish. And you'll be amazed at the things that can happen, the connections that can be made. And as someone was saying, that there are other jobs besides just the main rock star character animator on a show that can get you in and get you started on your career. But you must take those steps. You cannot do it if you're going to be living in a vacuum at home, which is where we all love to do our thing, being introverts as we are and artists. We want to stay in our bubble, but you must break that bubble and get out there and circulate online and in person. And that is how you're going to start making connections that will lead to your first jobs, that will lead to the next job and the next and the next. So that's just an overall answer to kind of answer some of the questions that were being asked. But how about you guys? What do you think?
That is exactly how my career started. I had a little show reel of myself that I developed during the animation school. And with that, I went to the Annecy Festival in France to meet some people. And that's how my adventure started. It started in Ireland in a small studio in Dublin, run by an animation mentor called Barry O'Donoghue, great guy. Hi, Barry, by the way. And then from there, I went to Cartoon Saloon, and then every other job actually branched out from there. You know, it was either former colleagues in Cartoon Saloon who hired me for their own thing, or people who knew them, who saw my work. And so from there on, it started. So I would say that I subscribe all you said. It's important to jump into the be a bit social at the beginning. Don't be too shy, and be where the people is, and be visible, show your work, and maybe improve your communication skills, which doesn't mean much. It's just, make yourself visible. Don't be too hard on yourself. And when you start is right the moment where you can do mistakes. So if you had a bad drawing to show it, so someone can give you feedback, and so you can learn what's bad about it. That would be a first step, a very important first step. And so don't be afraid of feedback, and be where the buzz is, where the people is. And from there on, if you have some skills, I would say, jobs are going to chase you. It's literally like that.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, often I talk about the portfolio. For us animators, it's the showreel. It's actually make things quite simple. You might still think today that, oh, I need a website, I need to write a resume, I need to do to present. It feels like you've got this overhead of things that you need to do just to start looking for work. But the truth is that as an animator, you need one showreel. You need to have a YouTube account, and you need to put your video on there. And if it's good, you'll find work for sure. And that's the first step. But also, as I was saying before, you have some more entry levels opportunities. So, for example, you don't need to technically be an animator to be a cleanup artist or to do the colors. So you could just simply show with still frames that you can do some good inking, what we call inking, or cleanup. So basically, you can draw some good lines that are controlled. You can use Toon Boom. You can just show that you can use Toon Boom. Just that is already something useful for a studio, and you might find a studio that's interested in that. So that reduces, in my view, that overhead, the hurdle. You need very little to start looking for work. What's important is that wherever you put out there shows your skills. You have to show your skills. People are not going to guess what you can do. You got to show them. So and not be afraid, for sure. So yeah, that's what I would have to say on that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people are not aware. Like, you don't need that much. Like, for example, like the school I did, we had to create like a 30 to 45 seconds short film, and we took like a year and a half to work on it from script to finish, which is almost too long to work on something that short. But at the same time, it was to try to be employable and have like one piece of qualitative work. But that's usually what I say to students. Like, if you have like a good 30 to 60 seconds of animation, like Alfredo said, it's going to be enough. People are going to see like, oh, you can do it, let's go. The problem is sometimes to think about doing 2, 3, 4 minutes. And the point is, if you don't convince someone with the first 30 to 60 seconds, it's not another 30, 60 seconds of the same thing that will convince them. So always, in the beginning, keep it short, I think, which is like, and like you said, Psych, I think that an exercise that I started to do recently is when I had students that had opportunities to work in cleanup, instead of doing, for example, a show reel of their own work being cleaned up, I just told them, go find an animation online. Like, there's some pencil tests of Klaus. I would make them take some pencil tests of Jasper from Klaus, and I would say, try to clean 10 drawings back to back of this, and try your lines to not shake too much and see if you're actually able to do this.
Yes.
And yeah, and after just like, if you have like a half a second or a second or 2 seconds of like really well cleaned up work, people will know that you can do it, right? Because that's really, I think we've all said this today, but it's very merit based or skill based, whatever you're going to get as a job in the industry. So if people feel like you can do it, there's so much job in studios nowadays that, people will give you some job to do, but if they're scared that your skills are not, not par with what they're looking for, that's where it gets problematic, right? When people get no's when they apply, it's usually because clearly their portfolio is not showing, a good understanding of the basics. And that is stressful for an employer, because you're like, oh, that means that this work will need to be redone or heavily supervised by somebody who's already way too busy supervising other people. So that's always, you have to think about this. You have to show that you're able to do those skills. And I think, you have to be able to go out there and get some, often I tell my students, go and get some no's, right? Go, maybe don't start with your favorite studio ever, right? And get, sort of like discouraged because they say no, but find 20 studios and go talk to 10 of them that you maybe care less about or you haven't heard that much about. And if they all tell you that you're not at the right level right now, then just accept this reality and that you need more work on your skills and do that and come back later. Because, and maybe your answers are going to differ from mine in this, but I think that being an animator or an artist in general is a lifelong commitment to learning to get better. I think we always we up our skills on every project. Sometimes, we take breaks from project to just work on our own stuff and we get better at this. And so it's not because right now a student or somebody looking for work is not getting a yes based on their skills that it's a death sentence on their career, right? I think it just means that right now on the timeline of their career, they're not, at the right place, right? They have to push further and then, jobs will come.
If I can jump in on this, let's go back to my experience on Klaus or Cartoon Saloon. Getting a no or rejection from the people you are working with, like supervisors or director, is the everyday thing for, even if you are in the studio, you are hired and then you get so many no's, so many rejections. So that's normal. That's, the no's that you're gonna get now are the first of a long series. So don't be discouraged. Get used to that, because even when you're hired, you're gonna get a lot of no's until you get one shy yes, like a maybe. And that means you can go to the next shot. That's how you reach quality. Actually, it's by redoing stuff better the next time. So it's not that after you get hired it's all like parties and yes and everything you do is approved. Absolutely not. It's actually the opposite. So
yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know, just to, because I think we're all on the same page on this here, but just for maybe an external ear that would find that this seems a little bit intense, I think it's the promise that, this line of work will make you better over time, right? Because it never stops to ask more of you in a positive way. Because often when you start to get good, people will give you better shots to do. For example, if you're an animator, and then suddenly you're kind of bad at it again because it's too hard. And then they give you tips, they give you feedback, and then you get better. And then you're like, finally, I'm good enough. And then they give you a bigger shot, and you're like, oh boy, 12 people playing music at the same time, I'm gonna die. And it's just like a cycle of, trying to just be able to play the part right. But I think it's a very fun way, I think, it's often a thing I say to students. I've been, I'm a little bit younger than you guys, but by barely a couple of years. And still to me, it feels like I'm looking back at, more than 10 years of mostly fun, right? I know a lot of other lines of work are fun, but at least I know that mine is, and I would wish that upon anybody that wants to do this for a living, right? It has been fun. I think it will keep being fun, I hope. And I think it's fun for most people I've met, right? I've traveled a lot when I was working at Toonboom and not preaching here, but I was teaching for them a little bit in every studios, and I've been amazed at going to so many countries where people in animation are like a special breed of humans almost. It feels like everybody is super welcoming, super nice, super artistic, but never there's a humble thing to do cartoons, because you're not Picasso, you're not pretending to be Picasso, you're just trying to do some entertainment with drawings.
One great thing about this environment is that there is a lot of meritocracy. if you're good at something, you will be rewarded for that. It's very unlikely that people who is not capable is not going to be rewarded for their skills. And people who is not skilled, it's very unlikely that they can cheat, up to a certain position. At some point, you will get brought back to where you need to be. And so if you have skills, you will be rewarded. That's for sure.
And this is why I always say that you should love what you do and do what you love. And again, that we were all animating or creating art before we even got paid to do it. And the people who are going to last, the people who are going to make it, are the ones who love it so much they can't imagine doing anything else. And sometimes I think that I got into the business out of sheer dumb persistence and luck. I never considered that what I was doing was not really possible. Just so you guys know, anybody out there listening, when I got into the business, there was no business. And like you said, Hubert, things were slow. There was no business. And I just said, I'm going to do this anyway, to the horror of my parents and to the cynicism of my friends. So you do what you love and you love what you do. You've got to take care of business, but you also have to do what you're here to do. And something else I want to point out is stay active. Not only circulate, but look what's happening in the industry. The reason we're talking about AI is because it's a thing. And so don't bury your head in the sand and think, well, I just love doing this one thing and I'm just going to do that and work in a vacuum. Unless you really just want to be an artist and on your own terms and do whatever you want. But if you're wanting to be a part of this community, this exciting community that we all belong to and love and have loved for many years now, you have to kind of keep your eyes and ears open as to what's happening out there. And you do have to adapt. Somebody asked about tips for animation composers. I think compositing is the least valued area. Yeah, you have to go with trends. I knew ink and paint people that ink and painted traditionally. One day their job was made obsolete by The Lion King. We saw how it looked, and it looked better than anything that had come before. Yes, we lost the art of ink and paint and the organic quality of it, but we gained The Lion King. When I saw the writing on the wall for 3D, that 3D was coming and it was going to change the face of animation, I was scared. I loved my job. I loved doing 2D and I didn't want to leave it. But I also thought, yeah, it won't hurt to try. And so I tried it and I found that I really liked it a lot. So keep your options open. Don't be afraid. Come to CG Spectrum, try different courses and stay with it. Don't give up just because you're not doing the one single thing that you love to do the most. You may be really surprised. So just keep that in mind. We've got about 9 minutes left. And so we're going to start kind of wrapping it up a little bit. If you have any final questions, now would be a really good time to put them in. I'm trying to answer them via text. We can answer them via live, but maybe we'll start thinking of some final thoughts. Anything that you guys would like to leave potential students with?
Just quickly, one of the things I love about the school, and that's why it's a good path. You can learn a lot of stuff on your own. It's something that artists can do. You can develop your own style. But the advantage of going to school is that you will save a lot of time for start, because you will be taught things that will take you a lot of time to learn on your own. And you'll have different perspectives. You'll have people will review your work and give you ideas that you would not have on your own. That's the good thing. But also altogether, you get to do all these exercises throughout the studies. And at the end of it, you have something to show for your efforts. You have that the exercises you did throughout the courses is what will be in your first showreel. And you probably would not, it would be harder to do that on your own, to try to produce, to be productive, to have a good feedback on what you're doing, to produce your own showreel out of nowhere. It's a great place to be in school, not just to have feedback from mentors, but other students. And if you really dedicate your time to it and you put some efforts, you can have some really nice pieces of animation at the end of it that you can right away show to the world. So this is why I went to school for animation. I made a short film before I went to school, and I realized while doing it that I was like, there's probably a lot of things I need to learn. I need to go to school and learn those things. So that'll be my little note.
My final note is that there has been never been a better period, I think, to be an animator, because there is so many resources. Like, I was 20 in 97. There was no internet in my city. So if I needed some resources, I had to go out of the house and go to the library and, call people at the phone. now you can do your own thing, show it to the world, and get some guidance. Like, for example, you can get it through CG Spectrum, and it's on these aspects. It's never been so easy, to be honest, to be visible and to communicate with the people you want to talk to. So don't be afraid. Just don't be afraid of feedback too. You know, that's something that I need to stress about. Don't be discouraged by people criticizing your work, because that's what happens when you start working. You know, it's like getting critiques and improving your work every day more.
And I think one of the, because I like one thing you said, it's like about the fact that you have to commit time. I think that's one of the key things. Is like anybody could learn to animate, anybody could learn how to draw. I think it's a lot, you know, it's a lot about how much time you want to put, how much effort you want to put in. And of course the school is, you know, is offering to guide you through that process. But I think what's really strong at school is that it's a very tailored approach. You know, the approach is very tailored to the student. And I think, you know, at least for me, I will adapt to whoever I have in my group or class. And, you know, people that are looking for work will have, you know, I'll criticize them a bit more harshly, just to make sure that they really get the feedback they need. Some people that are just trying and dip their toe in animation, you know, I'll go with that flow as well. I think what's fun is that we're following people to the pace I think they need most at the moment. And it is a personal journey, right? You have to do it. It's not like even if you take a class, you have to come to the class and you have to commit to the exercises and push hard. And it's something that will stay with you, right? I think it might be sometimes a different approach than some brick and mortar, you know, courses where you would go physically somewhere. But I feel like it stays with you even more, just because you have to really commit. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna do this exercise for this week. You know, I'm gonna spend, like, depends, like 5-10 hours depending on like which term you're at. But there's time to be put in, and that I think is a very positive approach to like learn with us, because it's the way you should be learning your whole life after anyway. And it's even the way we all work in animation, right? There's no I feel like animation is not like a quick check mark list type of thing, right? You have to, like, okay, I have this scene to work on. Like you said, Alfredo, maybe you're going to spend, you know, a whole day on like 1 to 5 seconds of animation. It's not
week.
like, yeah, whole week, yeah. But you know, is it 1 second a day usually in class?
On Klaus was like at the beginning 3.5 per week.
Per week? Okay.
Yeah,
So less than a second
I
a day.
ended up my fastest was like 30 seconds per month.
Okay. So a little bit more than a second a day. Okay. But you know, it just you know, proves the point that, you know, animation is really like you have to be okay, and that's probably like the antithesis to like AI, right? You have to be okay with sitting down and playing with this for a while and enjoying the process of it, right? And I think, you know, we all love it here. You know, when I teach my students, I try to communicate that joy of drawing, animating, that curiosity of like really understanding the craft. But yeah, I think it's a fun ride if you want to jump in.
Yes. Now, I would love to talk to you guys for the rest of the day. And guess what? I can, because I work here. But if you, as students, if you want to come and join us and join in this conversation, I urge you to check us out, cgspectrum.com. We have all sorts of things that we can offer to you if you have an interest in animation or digital arts in general. And so don't hesitate to at least, you know, check us out, see what we're up to, and feel free to ask us any questions. Somebody asked about contacting us. I think most of us have websites or other ways to contact. I don't think you can contact us directly via the school, but I think most of us have online profiles and things. So, you know, check us out that way if you want to reach out. But more than anything, we want you to reach out to the school, and we'll be able to talk to you more there and answer your questions, even more questions than we've answered today. I hope I got into everything with everybody. We've had some good times today. If you have any more thoughts or questions, like I said, reach out or talk to admissions, CG Spectrum. beyond that, I would like to thank you. Thank you to
Thank
my
you.
friends
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for
and
the
guests.
invitation.
And thank you for joining us today for this. Your words and your presence are invaluable. They're like gold. I would have loved to have had something like this when I was starting out. And so to those of you out there, I hope you've enjoyed this. To those of you here, I hope you enjoyed it. And we will see you next time.
See you next time.
See ya.
So, Scott.
Bye.
Yeah.